monitor the herd 7 days a week, collecting lots of data, and so that's what we're doing today. When we come up on a group of horses like this, we will make a note of any interesting behaviors that we're seeing. So if you watch them, they're gonna walk behind the fishing poles, but like they know that there's lines in the water. We want these horses to be wild and free, and so we don't want to interfere with their day-to-day natural lives. But at the same time, we are working to conserve a rare breed, and so it's important that we can do as much conservation work kind of behind the scenes and hands-off as possible. But they're all looking pretty good shape for the time of year and their age. Horses were originally reintroduced to North America by the Spanish when they started coming over here. They brought horses with them from Spain to begin with, but that didn't last for very long. They pretty quickly set up breeding farms in Central and South America and began breeding horses down there, and there was a very thriving horse trade up and down the East Coast. The horses here on the Outer Banks are unique because over the course of that history, once they were here to begin with, no one ever purposefully tried to improve them with other domestic stock. These horses have remained very unique in that they really are the last of that original type of horse that was first introduced here 500 years ago. Without this habitat, without being able to live here in the wild, eventually they will cease to become what they are, right? If you could preserve the genetics, the actual DNA genetics on a farm by breeding them, absolutely, and they will genetically still be banker horses, but all of those adaptations will eventually go away if they don't have to use them. They are tied to this land as much as the land is kind of tied to them. It's very hard to separate that out. If you're watching these horses eat this grass, if you watch her eat this, you'll notice that she's not pulling that grass up by the roots. And so, one of the things that we want to make sure that this environment, this habitat stays viable and healthy for them, but also all the other wildlife. We don't want the horses to have a negative impact on the ecology of this place. And so that's something, there's been arguments in the past that the horses destroy the dunes. And so by sitting here and watching them do this, we're seeing they are not pulling the grass up by the roots. The roots are still there. And so that's different than how like a cow or, different types of ungulates eat. And so when we document this kind of thing, it helps us better understand how they utilize this habitat and what their impact on it is. The horses that we're seeing here today are the product of hundreds of years of these horses learning how to survive here. Well, this is one of those tricky situations because, these people have obviously set up here. They were probably here long before the horses decided to come out onto the beach. That is part of their breed characteristic. They are used to being around people. They're easy to work with, and 200 years ago, that served them very well. Now when we have so few of them left, they're being encroached upon worse and worse every year. That is a characteristic that doesn't always serve them well. Something could happen and spook them in a minute, and then they scatter and they run, and if you're in the way, you're gonna get run over. We just ask people to use some common sense and, give the horses their space, and eventually the horses will move on. I think it's finding the balance of the balance, and because the fact of the matter is there's always going to be people around them. That's never going to change, and so I think that we just have to figure out how to live with it in a way that doesn't negatively impact them and also allows people to still come here and have access to this area and come to the beach here and see these horses.